Joining us now in Washington, Senator Mike Crapo from the great state of Idaho, former head of the Banking Committee. I think you're on finance now, Senator Crapo. And I don't know if you heard Kevin McCarthy and what he said outside the White House. If you had any reaction to what he said.
Yes, I did hear it, Larry, and he did say they didn't reach any agreements, but he did also say they had an hour discussion, which is more than the president said he was willing to do before the meeting started. So that's hopeful. The bottom line here is that the president put $4.8 trillion into our deficit in the last 2 years and is refusing so far to talk about any kind of fiscal responsibility. Revenues are not the problem. The TCJA from 2017 needs to be made permanent, and we need to focus on less spending, less taxing, less regulating, and less inflating. And we need to get a plan to do that.
It's a great message, Senator Crapo. I love it when you talk about making the Trump tax cuts permanent, because I think that would be a booster shot to the economy, because right now they're expiring. Let me ask you, sir, there have been some proposals around $3 of spending cuts for every $1 of debt increase, that sort of thing. What's your take on that? What do you think about that?
I support those kinds of proposals. You know, there are probably a dozen proposals similar to that have been put out over the years, and I think that some kind of an approach that just puts some parameters, some gates on the spending ability of Congress would be very, very much appreciated. And I also liked what the speaker just said, that they were, I thought I heard him say that they made some progress toward the notion of having regular order in the Senate and the House, doing all of our appropriations budgets and appropriations bills without an omnibus spending bill, and creating some process protections that would help us control the spending as well.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, he mentioned a two-year funding agreement without any omnibus bills, and he did mention regular order. You're quite right. What do you think about new spending caps and a penalty to violate it, the so-called sequestration, which is the automatic across-the-board cut? Charlie Hurt mentioned 10%, but whatever it might be. What do you think about adding those back in?
Those kinds of solutions are very effective solutions. You'll recall that came out of the Budget Control Act that was negotiated between Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden when he was vice president in one of our previous debt ceiling battles. And they worked very well. And so I'm very supportive of that kind of approach as well.
So what would your preference be? You have a lot of experience. People really respect you. You've run these big committees when the Republicans had the Senate. What's your favorite number one, dare I ask?
Well, I'm going to be general about that because, frankly, as the speaker just said, we're not going to do our negotiating in the media. But the bottom line is some kind of restrictions like you've just discussed, or like the Budget Control Act that we put into place. I'm very strongly in support of a balanced budget amendment that would put some constitutional protections and process requirements in place. But either way, we've got to recognize that revenue is not the problem. We've got to make the TCJA permanent, and we've got to go back to the strong economy that was given to us when we passed the TCJA in 2017, and then focus on the spending and on the reduction of regulations and on eliminating inflation.
Senator Crapo, first of all, this is Larry. I'm not in the media. You know that. But second of all,
I know that, Larry.
I agree with everything you've just said. Will there be something like these proposals coming out of the Republican conference in the Senate?
Oh, definitely. We have already had some caucuses in discussing these kinds of issues. Remember, this is going to start in the House, and so we are not in a position to tell the Speaker what to do, but we are in a position to work with the Speaker to help him understand what kind of support the Senate could bring to his endeavor. But in the end, we are going to be working and very heavily engaged in this as a Senate caucus. And as you will see as you talk to other Republican senators, there are Republican senators with very good ideas about how to approach this, and we're going to be pitching those ideas.
I know it's a cliche question, but you know Joe Biden a long time.
Yes.
Do you think he will change his attitude in the course of these discussions? In other words, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, who's become a very polished politician, in my opinion. He's done a very good job just in the short time as Speaker. He's had a much more conciliatory, compromising message without giving up his conservative principles. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has had a very negative, insulting kind of message. And yet, as we know, it was Biden who negotiated with John Boehner, the Republican Speaker, back in the Tea Party Congress of 2011. So this is a different Biden, Senator Crapo. Do you think this Biden will give way to the other Biden, or do you think this Biden is just going to, be a kind of mean, nasty, brutish, make jokes at the expense of the GOP and keep his head in the sand?
Well, Larry, that's the $64,000 question. As I just indicated, it was Joe Biden who negotiated the Budget Control Act. Bottom line, though, is you are right. Joe Biden as president has been a very different person. And everything that he has said up until this meeting with the Speaker has indicated that he is ready to say no to everything and follow the pressure from the far left in his party. What the Speaker just said gave some indication that their meeting was a little better. And so I'm going to be hopeful that the meeting they just had maybe broke the ice. But I got to see more before I'll answer your question as a definite yes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Kevin McCarthy is very good at this sort of thing, and he may be putting the best face on it, and who knows what actually happened. I'm dying to know if they had Diet Coke or coffee or whatever in that meeting. You and I both helped the president, who gave a lot of Diet Cokes out. Anyway, Senator Crapo, can I just switch gears slightly? Will we ever get a permitting bill that will reopen the spigots for oil and gas production, for pipelining, for refining, for LNG terminals? Will we ever get that kind of permitting bill through, sir?
Well, we are not done fighting for that, but what you saw in the last Congress when Joe Manchin was trying to get a meaningful permitting bill put together, I think is an indicator of what we can see now. There was very, very stiff objection to any kind of meaningful permitting reforms coming from the Democrat side. I think we are going to continue to see that. And so, again, I can't predict the outcome given that we now have a split Congress and we now have an opportunity to go back at it. I can assure you that we, the Republicans, on both the House and Senate side, are going to be pushing very hard for a permitting bill that works and gets us back into the game, not only in energy, but across the economy. I'll say again what I said earlier. We need less taxes, less spending, and less regulation, and less inflation.
Yes, sir. On the inflation front, you're former chair of the Senate Banking Committee. You're probably very much aware Jay Powell tightened policy again, indicated the Fed would continue to tighten policy, and that the inflation rate is still too high, despite the fact the economy is slumping. You have a thought on Fed policy? Are they too tight? Should they continue to tighten?
I know there's a huge debate over this. I come down on the side of saying that the Fed needs to continue tightening. We still have a 6.5% growth. Inflation rates are still far, at least triple, if not more than triple, what the target is, and even the target allowed for 2% inflation. We need to get back to where we were after the TCJA. I'll remind you and all the listeners that after we pass our tax legislation, the inflation rate, along with the strongest economy that we have seen in our lifetimes, was below 2%. We need to get there.
It would be nice if fiscal policy cut spending, cut taxes. That'll make it easier on the Fed. The inflation will go away because we'll produce more goods. Even more fossils. Right. I mean, how about that for a night? Senator Crapo, you're very kind to spend time with us. We appreciate it very much, sir. I hope you'll come back soon.
I'll do it. Thank you very much, Larry.
You bet. All right.